I was working at an international airport when a woman arrived 4 hours early for her flight and demanded we board her immediately because she was efficient and shouldn't be punished for other people's poor time management. She explained that her personal productivity coach taught her that waiting is for people without ambition. When I explained boarding times are set by the airline, she offered to pay me $200 to open the jet bridge early. She had the cash in her hand and everything. I see this kind of logic daily. Most people laugh at it. I catalog it. If that distinction makes sense to you, you already know where you belong. I was working TSA when a man refused to remove his shoes because he claimed he had ancestral foot. Sensitivity passed down from his great-grandfather, who walked barefoot across America. He presented a laminated family tree to prove his genetic condition. He suggested we get a portable X-ray machine specifically for his feet so they wouldn't have to touch the communist floor tiles. He'd already called his congressman about funding for it. Was working the ticket counter when a passenger insisted her emotional support pineapple needed its own seat because it had separation anxiety from being in cargo. She dressed it in a tiny vest that said medical fruit and had paperwork from someone calling themselves a produce psychologist. When I explained we don't provide seats for pineapples, she accused me of discrimination against tropical plants. She started a petition right there in line. I was working customs when an American returned from France furious that they spoke French there. He said he'd specifically booked France because it sounded American and was betrayed by all the foreign language signs. He demanded a partial refund for the psychological distress of being surrounded by people who weren't accommodating his English. He'd taken photos of French signs as evidence of the hostile environment. I was working the gate when a mom asked if we could fly lower so her kids could see the states better for their geography homework. She explained her children are visual learners and flying too high defeats the educational purpose of travel. When I explained altitude requirements, she suggested we at least fly in alphabetical order by state so the kids could follow along in their textbook. She had the textbook with her to show me the correct route. I was working security when a man tried to bring a full gallon of ranch dressing through because he said airports are a ranch-free zone and that's a human rights violation. He'd called it emotional support condiment and claimed he had dietary patriotism syndrome that prevented him from eating food without American dressing. He offered to drink the entire gallon right there to prove it was safe. He unscrewed the cap and everything. This isn't exaggeration. It's documentation. I collect these field notes weekly, mostly for people who prefer reality served unfiltered. If that's you, stay close. I was working baggage claim when a woman reported her suitcase was the wrong color because the airline must have painted it during the flight. Her black suitcase was still black, but she insisted it was now a different shade of black that clashed with her aesthetic. She demanded we repaint it to the original black or provide monetary compensation for the emotional damage of mismatched luggage. She had paint swatches to show the difference. I was working check-in when a passenger insisted his ticket said first class, even though it clearly said economy. He explained that in America all classes are created equal, so economy is technically first class by constitutional law. He'd brought a printed copy of the Declaration of Independence with the word economy highlighted nowhere because it wasn't mentioned, proving his point. He wanted to speak to a founding father. I was working the help desk when a man complained that the airport didn't have a traditional American food court, only chains like Starbucks and McDonald's. He wanted authentic American cuisine like pizza and tacos. When I pointed out those originated in other countries, he said once America perfects something, it becomes American by excellence. He demanded we open a Freedom Fries stand immediately. Entitlement was working departures when a woman arrived without her passport for an international flight and suggested we just trust that she's American based on her accent. She did a little speech to prove how American she sounded. When I explained passport requirements, she offered to text me a photo of her driver's license from 2003 as a compromise. She said TSA pre-check should mean pre-checked. For common sense, I was working the lounge when a passenger demanded we turn down the sun because it was shining too aggressively through the windows and violating his right to comfortable waiting. He claimed he had solar sensitivity from growing up in a basement. He suggested we install dimmer switches on the windows or provide complimentary sunglasses to all passengers. He'd already drafted a formal complaint to the Sun. I was working international arrivals when an American asked why we needed passport control if we're all on the same planet. He said borders are just imaginary lines and checking documents is participating in geographical discrimination. He'd read a blog about it. When I explained international law, he said laws are just suggestions that successful people ignore. He tried to walk past the booth using manifestation techniques. I was working lost and found when a woman reported her sense of direction was missing and wanted to know if anyone had turned it in. She explained she'd had it when she entered the airport, but now couldn't find her gate, despite it being clearly marked. She suggested we install homing beacons that pull passengers to their correct gates automatically. She was willing to beta test the technology. I was working customer service when a man demanded a refund because his flight arrived at the scheduled time instead of early. He said his time is worth $300 an hour, so arriving on time instead of 30 minutes early cost him $150. He'd brought an invoice for his lost productivity time. He wanted it processed as a business expense reimbursement. From the airline, I was working the rental car desk when a woman asked if we had cars that drive on the right side of the road because she was going to England and didn't trust their backward driving system. She wanted an American car that would force other drivers to accommodate her. When I explained UK traffic laws, she suggested she just drive in reverse the whole time as a compromise. She'd practiced in the parking lot. I was working the information booth when a passenger insisted the flight board was wrong because he'd manifested his flight for 3 p.m. and the board showed 5 p.m. He explained the universe was clearly having technical difficulties and needed to reboot. He asked if I could restart the flight board to see if it would align with his visualization. He'd been doing positive affirmations about departure. Times I was working gate services when a mom sent her unaccompanied 7-year-old on a flight, but also sent a note saying he doesn't follow instructions from strangers, so the flight attendants shouldn't tell him what to do. She explained he's an indigo child with natural authority resistance. She suggested the flight crew just let him regulate his own oxygen mask usage during emergencies. She'd packed crystals for his protection instead. I was working ticket sales when a man tried to buy a ticket using Monopoly money because he said, if the government can print money, so can Hasbro, and discrimination against game currency is unconstitutional. He had $2,000 in Monopoly bills organized by color. When I declined, he accused me of not supporting small businesses. He wanted to speak to Hasbro's legal department through me. I was working the shuttle when a passenger asked if we could skip the other terminals, because his time was more valuable than other passengers. Time based on his LinkedIn connections. He showed me his phone with 4,000 connections as proof of his importance. He offered to rank all passengers by social media followers to determine top priority. He'd already started a spreadsheet. Was working international check-in when a woman refused to declare any items because she said what happens in Paris stays in Paris, and customs is basically gossiping about her shopping habits. She claimed buyer-seller confidentiality protected her purchases. When I explained declaration requirements, she said she'd already manifested her bags through customs spiritually. She'd done a ritual in the bathroom. I was working the family lane when a dad insisted his teenage son count as a lap child to save money on the ticket. He explained his son still sits on his lap at home sometimes, so the airline should honor family traditions. He offered to demonstrate right there how his 6-foot-tall son could technically fit on his lap. He started positioning his son for a photo as evidence. Was working special services when a passenger demanded wheelchair assistance not because of mobility issues, but because walking is beneath her tax bracket. She explained people in her income level shouldn't have to ambulate through common areas like regular passengers. She offered to pay extra for what she called premium immobility services. She'd brought her own throne-style chair she wanted us to carry her in. I was working the complaints desk when a man filed a grievance against the airport for being too big and making him walk too far to his gate. He said the distance between check-in and his gate violated his constitutional right to convenience. He'd measured it on his fitness tracker as evidence. He demanded we install moving walkways directly from the parking lot to every gate, specifically calibrated to his personal stride. Length. I was working final boarding when a woman showed up 30 minutes after. The gate closed and insisted we bring the plane back because she'd paid for a seat and the seat should wait for her regardless of the schedule. She explained time is a social construct invented by airlines to oppress free-spirited travelers. When I explained the flight had departed, she asked if we could just send her luggage ahead, and she'd catch up emotionally. She was very serious about the luggage meeting her spirit at the destination. If this level of everyday mythology fascinates you as much as it frustrates you, you'll want to be here when the next chapter drops. I archive the decline weekly, quietly, consistently, and on time.